Welcome to the second episode of the Bao Podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin IJzermans, and my guest of today is Bart Verheyen. Bart is the co-founder and one of the owners of Stramien Architects. Stramien is a multidisciplinary design agency focused on architecture, urban development, spatial planning, and design of public spaces. They exist for more than 20 years at this point and have designed some great projects like the Thomas More campus in Mechelen, Ringland, and more recently the Railroad Park in Borgerhout, Antwerp.
That's right.
I only met Bart recently when we went for a walking meeting, which was a first for me. But I found his views on some of the bigger construction challenges enormously interesting. So when we were thinking about potential guests for the show, Bart immediately popped up in my mind. So without further ado, I would like to kick things off by welcoming you to the show. Bart, thank you.
Hello.
Thank you. Okay. Nice of you to join us. I just gave a short introduction.
Yeah.
Stramien, you've been doing it for 20 years, the agency?
Yes, I started as, like every architect with a stage, with an apprenticeship.
Okay.
And so from working in a small office, the office was always growing and expanding.
Mm-hmm.
And at a certain point, we decided to not only work together, but just organize our work together with some other offices in Antwerp.
Okay.
Offices who are not like us architectural offices, but office for urban planning, as you mentioned, landscape design, in one bigger organization, which was then called Stramien, because we had the enormous conviction that working together outside the boundaries of your own discipline, with people who are maybe thinking not like an architect, but on a bigger scale in urban planning, or people who don't only think about buildings, but about landscapes, where these buildings should fit in. It gives a much broader and richer design idea. And so we did some projects together as, let's say, as a test.
Okay.
And they were very successful. We won competition after competition.
Okay.
So
that's good news.
It was very nice. It was very nice to see. But at the meantime, it was also a practical problem that from one day to another, we were like an office that didn't exist yet, but had very fine projects like the new Permeke library or the original Eco House, the Eco House.
Those were the first projects that you
did? Were the first projects we did together. And so it was like a necessary step to get organized together. And without any business plan, but with a very strong feeling that this is right, we decided about more than 20 years ago, to put everyone's experience together and to say we will continue working on architecture, on urban planning, on landscaping, on design of public spaces, but as one office.
Okay.
An office without walls, literally, but also in
experience.
Yes, because we think there are no walls between these disciplines. An architect should think like an urban planner, and a landscape designer should know what architecture means. So that's why we look for those projects where these intersections between all these disciplines come together and can make a project that's much more integrated.
Okay.
So you have urban planners who say that a town is, or urban space is what's left between the buildings. And architects say, well, an urban space is made by the buildings around. So this kind of tension, we try to neutralize, to say, well, they just belong together.
Okay.
So if you think about an urban project for development of a big square, you should keep in mind the buildings that are around. Or if you have to design a building on a very public place in a town or in a small village, you should always have this idea about what's the space, what's the definition of the building, meaning for the space, or vice versa.
So, does it mean that, according to you, it's actually very strange to have an architecture agency that has no urban planners?
Well,
is for you the one essentially linked to the other?
For us, you can't divide them.
Okay.
But I know that there are other people who say architecture is the mother of all arts. And I think they're right, because architecture is also about proportion, about beauty, about poetry, about materials, about tradition. But it's not just only that. If you think about architecture as an object of just mere beauty, I think somehow it is relevant, but it's more than that. It has also a public function. It should serve people. It should answer to some kind of need, and it also has to last for very long, and not just be an answer to a fashion of this moment or of this era. So architecture is one of those many things, and for us, we think it's important, or we feel comfortable for ourselves, that when we think about buildings, we also think about public spaces around them. And if we think about public spaces, we always consider the buildings that define these spaces. So it's very difficult to explain the difference between both, but you can't separate. Okay. So somewhere there's a line between, but it shifts a bit.
When did you start to realize this? Because you studied architecture then, if I'm right? You're more focused on the architectural side of the design agency?
I did. I studied architecture in Antwerp and in Lausanne, Switzerland.
Okay.
First of all, my first idea was to become industrial designer. That was my first idea.
Okay.
Because I loved car design, and there was this nice school in Antwerp where you could follow. It's called product development at that time.
Yeah. It still exists, right?
It still exists.
A lot of the people...
Now it's at university level, but it was a separate school. And so I went there on the open days, being convicted to start. But I met a guy, a professor in architecture, who started telling about his job. And the more he was telling about his job, the more I was recognizing myself. And at that time, I made the idea that architecture and industrial design, they are very related to another. But with architecture, you have much more a one-to-one relation to the people you're working for.
So they actually live in what you're designing.
You have to create the place, a house, or the building they can live in. And so you meet the people, they come to you and they say, we have this question. And for me, this personal relation, I never thought about it, but for me, this personal relation was very important. So I chose architecture.
Okay.
And then, of course, you started apprenticeship, and I started to work in a small office with just one architect, and we were a bit successful. So they were coming at second one, third one, and at the end we were 7 people.
Okay.
And then there was this process of the other offices we met, like urban offices, landscape offices, and we started to work together. So it was a very harmonic, natural way of evolution. It was not a strategy. It was just a way of finding interesting paths.
It felt right.
Yeah, it felt right. Yeah. Right, but difficult.
Why?
Difficult because you're trained to think in a certain way.
Through the architecture.
Yes.
The education that you followed.
Yes.
Okay.
And then there are other people who say, well, you can also think in a different way. For me, what I admire so much in people who do urban design, that very often they have very strong ideas, very strong concepts, but the realization of the project or the idea is or done 10 or 20 years after, or done by other people. So as an architect, you make a design,
Yes.
and the constructor builds it. You can stand in your design and can see, oh, I did well there. Oh, there I make a mistake. With urbanism, you have to think about concepts, about structures, who often are just serving, how you say, people.
Way in the future.
Yes, way in the future, or governments who have to make some visionary ideas, and the realization of your thoughts is much more abstract or is done by other people. So that's a confrontation I was not aware of, and so in a way, architecture is much easier because you have a stronger and faster feedback than urban planning.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because at Bao, we sometimes complain because if we look around at other startups that we met throughout the couple of years that we exist now, if you're doing software, you have an idea, you can code it the minimal viable product, like the most basic version of your idea, you can do it in a weekend. We have one or two friends. You can ship it on Monday, and if you have a bit of luck or you have some reach, by the end of the week, people have used it, and you have your feedback, and you can iterate, and you can get the feedback, build another version, ship it again. So those really short feedback cycles are, we believe, or we think, is one of the main reasons why, for example, software has taken off so tremendously as it did in the last couple of decades, because it really allows you to really iterate very quickly and get all the necessary information to improve upon your product. And then it's the same for us. We are also part of the architect journey or the architectural journey. We are part of the building from the beginning.
And this goes much too slow for you.
Years. But now when I hear you talk about urbanism,
it's even slower.
It gives a perspective of it can be even way worse than...
Well, I don't know if it's worse, because patience is very good to have, and about some things you should take time to think about. But maybe the big difference between your job and developing software or developing models and architecture is that maybe architecture is still a bit too much archaic, old-fashioned, and architects maybe think too much. For every project they have to develop a new idea.
Start from a blank sheet.
Well, not a blank sheet, but start from not level 0, but maybe level 1, and go all the way again to create that unique building or unique solution for this unique customer and these unique people you build for. So I think architects should think about their role. They can play. They can keep on playing. And I think that standardization and using models is a way to not to enable creativity, not to force it down, but to level it up.
Yeah, like they say, that constraints allow
better results. Or more creativity.
Yeah.
But it goes. Well, sometimes in an architectural process, you find an idea on 2 minutes. It just pops in your head while you're cycling or having a beer or when you're sleeping or dreaming. But then there's all this process of putting this idea into reality. You have to make plans and drawings to convince the customer that's for him it's a good idea. Then you have to make calculations. How much will it cost? How do we construct it? How do you tackle all the technical things? And then you have to find someone who can build it for a good price. But first of all, you have to get permission. So all these steps, sometimes from this idea of 2 minutes, take 2 years, before you can actually build it or realize the building. So even that's why you can say that's slow, or it depends on what what you used. It also can you can say it's quite fast. And then some of these steps you can optimize. I think the last step for the construction. I think there. I told you on our inspirational walk. It was very cold. I remember, but I told you about the way the construction sector, the construction is done here in Belgium, in Flanders, is still very archaic, very old-fashioned, with more or less traditional materials, but also nearly every project starts from zero. How do we think about realizing the structure, making the walls? Should we prefabricate them or make them on site in concrete or in stones? So there are always these same decisions being taken, and it creates a building process that also costs quite some time. That also makes a lot of things can go wrong, because again you have to think about how should we do this, and what's a combination with that. It also creates a lot of waste. You have to make 2 walls, but you buy bricks for 2.5, so then you throw them away. So there is a waste, and I think in that part of the construction area there is so much to be that can be done better by thinking before on a digitally way or on a constructive way. So you can build the building digital with the BIM modeling, or you can decide to build it prefabricated and just do the simulation on site
in a factory environment.
Voilà.
Okay.
So then you can minimize the risk of having bad weather. Having transport of stones being stuck in the traffic jam. So you can avoid all these kind of risks by building with prefabricated elements. But therefore, architects should make their concept knowing these systems. And so I think I think as an architect, it is wrong to say, well, if I have to use systems to build something, I can't be creative anymore. I think that's not right. I think you could say that if there are systems who exist, I can still find my creativity in how I will compose them, use them, in what way I make something with this, like small Lego stones. If you have 4 children, you give them the same bucket of small Lego stones, they will all build
something completely
different. So I think there is very much room, very much space for creativity in an industrialized building system.
There is beauty in the constraints.
Yes, but also in the system. I don't know if you know Jean Prouvé.
No.
He was a very famous French engineer.
Okay.
Working, I think, during 30s or 40s, before the war, in aviation, building airplanes somewhere in France. And after the war, there was so much cities demolished after the war. So he thought with the system of building airplanes to make buildings.
1940s.
Yes, after the war, 45 to 50, 55.
Okay.
He did some very nice projects building villages also in Africa, always based on a system of prefabrication. in aluminum, because it's light, it's easy. You can use it wherever you want. So this was a guy who also made furniture.
Yeah.
And I think it is a very underestimated. It's not an architect, so by architects is kind of underestimated.
He was a product developer.
It's an engineer.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think his designs, his buildings, his furniture, they have a beauty, they have a lightness, they have poetry, and still they are made with standard components.
And they were made in a factory as well?
Yes, they were prefabricated. So I think his own house still exists somewhere in the neighborhood of Nancy. North of France, and it's very nice building. But you can see the facade is built with the same system of panels, with glazing, with insulation in aluminum. And I think, well, maybe aluminum is not the right material anymore, but you can think in a way he did, and you can make fantastic buildings out of it.
I had no idea.
Look it up, Jean Prouvé. Yeah, you will be surprised.
We will put it in the show notes as well.
Okay.
Do you know why it ended? Why did they stop producing the buildings like that?
No, I should read about it. No, I don't know.
We can look it up.
Maybe he died. I don't know.
It's definitely an option. probably an option. Anyway, what I was wondering, Bart, because if I hear your story, what stands out for me is the idea that you had when you were with those 6-7 people and you started to work together with the different parties in the development process, like the people who do the urbanization.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
At which point did you realize when you were doing this, like, okay, I think we're on to something? Like, was it a specific project? Was it a specific conversation you had with the people who focus on urbanization, or because I could say it's something that with Stramien you are specialized in now?
Well, I think it was the feeling that we came with discussing together. We came to solutions and concepts that we would not reach, or we would not have reached when we would have done it just alone. For instance, when we thought about the Permeke building, which was an old garage from the Fort Permeke, it was in a very bad shape. It was it was a concrete structure at ground level and a steel structure at roof level, just 2 levels. But around there were just houses, so no one could see this building. It was like a hidden thing. And someone said, well, we have to open it up so people can see this old construction. And if we then make the roof nice again, the glass roof, light coming in, and we open up the ground level, we'll have a covered urban space. Maybe that's a good idea in this area where there is a lack of open space. And in our climate, covered spaces, maybe that's not so bad idea. So I think from this point of view, the decision was made that we should build less, just take away things, make no facades, take away buildings, and make open spaces. And so we entered the competition with this idea. And then afterwards, it was decided, well, maybe this concept is not so bad to make a library, because the library is a public space. You should walk in, you should be invited. Maybe you even shouldn't notice you're in or out. It's a part of town. Of the town. So this concept was easily adapted by the people of the city of Antwerp to organize their new library. So I think the feeling was, well, we were proud of the idea, and the idea came from, yes, how should I say, the combination of different ways of thinking.
And because it's when you were explaining it, it just makes sense. It feels like how you explain it, that it makes a lot of sense. As an outsider, I haven't studied architecture, but when I hear you explain the logic behind it, so when you guys have been doing it for 20 years, do you see competitors or other people were starting to do the same?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. At that time, I'm talking about 20 years ago, it was kind of new here in Antwerp, in Vlaanderen, to say, well, we're an office combining all these disciplines and putting them together in projects. There were offices having the same disciplines, but as separated specialism. There's architecture, there's urbanism, and they're doing their own things. There's no crossing. I think now, luckily, I'm happy to see that many people, designers, try to do the same. Some out of commercial reasons, but there are other offices who really have the same conviction that the small scale and the big scale they belong together. We say on our website we work from van stoel tot stad, from a chair to a town, and both have the same complexity. To make a good chair, it's not easy.
No.
To think about a city that functions is not easy, and they both have the complexity of the small scale and the big scale is quite similar. So you can work together on it.
You can combine it.
Yes.
Okay. And then does that also, because you were one of the first, if not the first, in Antwerp and the region who started combining these disciplines. Was it also like a logical conclusion for the agency to go towards projects like Ringland, for example? Because you explained to me that you played quite a pivotal role in the development of Ringland.
Yes. First, I have to make clear that when we started, I was just a young guy.
Okay.
Knowing very few, and there were other people who who had much more experience than me. So I was on this flow. I was not the only one taking the initiative. I was working with other people. So architects I was working with had 20 more years experience than me. So it was I took part of this process. Ringland maybe is a very special situation, which was an idea of my colleague Peter Vermeulen.
Okay.
And who was already for years and years thinking about the problem of the development of the city of Antwerp and the problem of the ring and the congestion of traffic around the town. So it was, at one time he had an idea to solve this, to solve the system of the traffic. To say, well, how traffic works around Antwerp is creating a problem because all these intersections and exits they have to be combined in two little places. So we have to organize it in a different way. Maybe we should separate. We should separate local traffic from national traffic, but we should not separate them one aside to the other, but one above the other. So we should put them one on the other one. And from this idea, the logical consequence was that if you put traffic not aside but on top,
not horizontally but vertically,
there is much space. You get much space, and the system of the traffic around Antwerp is like excavated in the old
the walls,
the
city walls.
Voilà. So you could also think about covering it up. And from this idea came the model of Ringland that said, well, if you cover it up, you win enormous amount of space. You can try to find a solution for pollution, and also solve this traffic problem. So the covering of the ring was more of a spin-off of the idea than the beginning of the idea.
Yeah, the original idea was to put it To make local and national traffic no longer
separated.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
separated,
and then put it vertically instead of horizontally.
Yes, that was the basic idea, and so Peter came with this idea in the office. Everyone said, "Well, it's not possible. It's so simple. Let's try to find a place where it doesn't work, but it works." Huh?
Yeah.
And so this model, this idea, began having its own life. Huh? Of course, there were urban planners and landscape designers in the office say, "Well, that's interesting. We can study on it, and then how should it look, and how should we do it, and maybe we should make a little film about it." And so the idea came in its own dynamic. We supported it very much at the beginning with Stramien, with our know-how, with people working on it. But now it's luckily grown up as an independent organization, which we still love very much. But I don't think that we can say at this time that Ringland is just is the product we as Stramien we made.
No.
We have been part of this dynamic. We were very happy to be at the front of this evolution, and we're still very involved. But it's now we're happy to see that it now has grown up, and let's hope that the first realization are coming soon now. Of course, during the years, the basic ideas have been transformed a bit. They have been maybe a little less radical, but still, I think there is a very big result in what we see today that Ringland started.
What has been de-radicalized from the original idea?
That the original idea said you have to cover the ring totally.
Completely.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's only slight.
It's like different parts. Huh?
Yeah.
And so in each part there has been made a decision for the best solution of that for that location. So it has been much more detailed and much more studied on, also with much more people. Some people with other ideas, also political ideas that interfere. But anyway, it has at least started a dynamic, and I think when we will see the impact of the idea, for instance, at the site of Merksem and Sportpaleis, or in the north of the town. I think people still do not realize the transformation
it's going to happen.
It will make, but it will be a very positive thing. I'm very sure.
Yeah, I think everyone who lives in Antwerp and has looked into the plans or what's going to happen, even though it's still like a decade away.
I hope. Recently, I noticed that people in Antwerp are very critical when it comes to architecture.
Yeah, but still.
Voilà. But I think when the first results will be visible and people can see the enormous space that was wasted before and now has been rediscovered, will be very good.
It must be interesting because it's this kind of project that's actually like it's almost like a career spanning enterprise, like from the first idea till the time that it's going to be that you can walk on it. It's like 30 years.
I think the first idea for Ringland was about 10 years ago.
Okay, and by the time that it's built, 2030 they say now?
Yes.
So 20 years.
20
okay.
years. Yeah.
It's going to be a very satisfying walk, I can imagine.
Yes, but we do not, I repeat that, we do not claim to be the only author of the project. We are happy we could contribute, and we have to be honest, it was my colleague, Peter Vermeulen, who deserves all the credits.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well done, Peter.
Congratulations, Peter. Maybe quickly to get back to a little point that you just made at Steen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has been fascinating, I must say, because I live close to it. I drive with my bicycle next to it a couple of times a week, and then you see indeed the conviction of people when they see this project being realized, when it's already quite far actually in the entire process, and then they start to see it and
they criticize.
There's quite a big backlash. Yeah. Do you think that has changed? Do you think that people are now more active in their criticism of these kind of projects?
Well, I think recently with social media, it's much easier to criticize.
Yeah.
You post something but
do you have a personal opinion about the project?
Yes, I do.
Would you be interested to voice it?
Well, maybe first of all, it is not finished yet.
Okay.
So you should give the project its credits to finish. To finish. Secondly, if you see the history of the building,
yes,
there is still just one small fragment of the original fortification that was at Steen.
Okay.
And all the rest of the buildings, like the towers, also the part that was demolished to make place for the new project, they were added during last century, during the 50s. So now they took one part away, which was the worst part from the 50s. It was not original. It was like a kind of imitation building. And on that part, they put this new volume, which is now under construction. So the architects, which I appreciate very much, are very clever and very well detailed and well. They thought about the project as being just one step in this evolution of buildings always changing and changing and changing. Yeah. And I think the only problem with the project is that people now react because maybe they're a bit surprised. They didn't know what was going to happen. I don't think the architecture is a problem, but the communication was.
Yeah.
And with the social media, everyone now is used to be informed about everything worldwide, just 3 clicks away, and you know what's happening everywhere. And maybe for this project, communication was maybe a bit underestimated. But when you look at the building from the water side, you should take the boat from the left bank to the right bank. You can see that this new volume, the composition, is very well in balance with the old building.
Okay.
So the criticism is about one part at the back of the building, which is not finished yet. So I think we have to give credits to the architects and at least wait until it's ready, and at least consider that this is just one of these very many steps in the evolution of a building that was not a building at the beginning. It was just a small part. 90% of the old fortification is just demolished. Huh?
I had no idea.
When they made the river. The
banks,
the river banks, they made it on the right way. I think it was just before or after Napoleon. I don't know. Huh?
Okay.
So it was just demolished, and now there's this kind of romantic reflex, which is good. You have to be proud of history of the city, but you also have to understand what your
what the history is.
The history and how this project is just a small step in evolution to next.
Who are the architects?
NOAA architects. Architects, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, I'm looking at the clock. I think we have another 15 minutes, Martin. Am I correct?
Okay.
Yeah, roughly 15 minutes. All right.
Okay. Maybe there's some theme we didn't spoke about.
No,
but it was in your preparation list.
Indeed.
Yes.
Sprawl?
Yes.
Indeed. I had it written down as well.
Okay.
Yeah, because
let's talk about
during our our walking meeting, which, by the way, I can advise everyone to try out. Really fun way to have a first introduction is to go for a walk. I think that's maybe something that positive that happened from COVID, which I learned from you. But no, indeed, during our walk, you spoke with a lot of insight and conviction about the Belgian problem, I would say, called urban sprawl, which definitely in Flanders has become quite a bad situation, I think. And now also with the upcoming concrete stop in 2040, and the influence of this decision on the heritage that we got from everything that has happened in the recent decades on this problem. So maybe you could explain in a couple of sentences how you look at this issue, how you could see it being solved, and where we go from here.
Well, we have to understand that it's just maybe 3 or 4 generations away, that there was a kind of politic that after the Second World War in Belgium or in Vlaanderen, it was the idea that every family should have its own house. And this has been put on an evolution that even today people find, or it is accepted, or it's accepted as important, as a very important thing to realize your own house and to think individually about dwelling. That's our tradition.
About the
dwelling, housing.
Dwelling. Okay,
housing.
Yeah.
Housing is still in our tradition a bit of a individual thing when it comes to young people getting together, getting married, looking for a place to live, constructing their own house and so on.
Preferably something that they thought out completely on their own and completely unique.
Yes, or maybe the father or the uncle,
indeed,
who was also a sponsor, has made a contribution. But now we see that if everyone keeps on doing so, space is consumed in so large proportions that we still, I don't know how many football pitches we consume every day, but it goes on. So this process, if we say we have to stop it, we will have to think first, but how does it come? Why do people think it's so important to have this place of their own? And why can't we find another model to give them this kind of individual identity, privacy, but in a shared environment? What strikes most to me is that people say that here in our area, we were born with a brick in the stomach, the baksteen in the maag. So everyone wants to build his house and wants to build his house looking like he thinks his house should look like. So you could say, well, it's a way of trying to be individual and express your individual
taste. Preference.
But recently, now when weather is getting better, I cycle a lot through the area. And if you see the houses being built, you can see, or they're like a white block in the wood, or they're like a little small maisonette, or like, the Spanish, they're gone, but the small village housing they were imitate. So it's very strange that people want to have their own house, looking like their own house, but at the end, they more or less all look the same. So I think you can maybe try to find, or you can translate this eager to have this individual thing into a community thing. And that's why we are so convicted in projects like co-housing and like trying to intensify built spaces in towns, but also in villages, and not consuming new open space anymore. So if you have, for instance, a group of 20, 25 or 30 families, you can bring together in a project. You can see that you can realize for every individual family, a good place to live. Someone will like to have it small, compact. Another one wants to have a big one, but you can combine it together, and you can put them on a more condensed space with enough privacy for everyone and with shared space for many. So this type of co-housing, which was at the beginning seen as some alternative way of living, it's not interesting. I think it has a future. We realized some projects, but not yet in the center of the town. So I think the next step is to try to find a model to build this kind of individual dream into a vertical. A vertical sprawl. Okay. We should try to put it together and to put it on top, so that also you can try to attract young people come live in city centers or in places where maybe at first sight there is not so much open space and not so much green, but if you can make a model of it, you can build closer to each other and leave more open space. So I think nature and urbanism, and that's one of the themes we will try or hope to go to, is that cities and nature will have to be stronger together again, and not being separated, that once you're out of town, you're in nature. I think they're interesting models to put them back again.
Yeah. Like the project that you did recently or announced recently about the city park that's being built on top of the old train tracks.
Yes,
that's
the railroad
example.
park. Yeah. Well, there it is. We realize a green space for the community of people living around. It is a very dense area where people live, so they have need of green space very near to their houses. It's also a connection for people, for walking, for cycling. But also, I think in the way we can think about houses, how they should be built, how they should have their own space. We should try to find new models that can be integrated in city center, in villages, without disturbing the scale of the location, but with the ambition of putting enough people together, so that you can leave the open space as it is today, and leave it open.
How do you see? Because if you look at Belgium or at Flanders currently, and I've grown up in Flanders.
Me too.
Probably. I mean, it's such a big contrast. If you drive to the Netherlands, from the moment you cross the border,
you can see
all open fields and nature and waterways between the cities, and then you pass into Flanders, and it's just there are cities, but the rest is all connected to each other. And
it comes from this tradition that we say we have to build our own house, and it's like an individual thing. In Holland, it's more like a collective thing. It's also tradition. They say during centuries and centuries they had to fight together against water.
Right, that's true.
So building for them is like an act of community.
It's a collective thing.
Yes, for us, building is an act of the individual. And it goes further. We consume space, and we also waste space. There are leftovers when you have a building site of 20 meters, and you put your house in the middle. The part at the left and the right side, it's wasted. You can't use it anymore. Well, you can sit there, but your neighbor has the same thing, 3 meters. So we're not very intelligent using space. And even these wasted places, we even don't see them anymore. If you cross the border from Belgium to Holland, or from Holland to Belgium, for us, I can say that what is made in a collective way in Belgium belongs to nobody. What's being built in a collective way in Holland belongs to everybody. So people here don't identify with public spaces. They appreciate less because they have their own thing. As long as I can do what I want between my own walls, the neighbor can do the same, and I don't give a shit. So there's not this tradition of thinking together and being convicted that if you do things together, it can be done better.
How are we going to change that? Because I do think that's an essential thing to change if we want to make Belgium and Flanders more livable, no?
I think it will change.
It is changing.
Yeah, I can see that many young people who work in the office are convicted of the idea. I can see with my own children also, they say, well, we will have to do something about it. Maybe there's not just one recipe, but I think that belief is a very strong recipe, that things should change, in that everyone, like architects, but also politicians, investors, project developers, should more, maybe a bit more than today, try to work together to find a good solution. And for the architect, I can only speak for the architect. He has to realize, or she, of course, she has to realize that when you make a design, you're at the beginning, just at the beginning of a process which will last, as we said at the beginning, 2 or 3 years. But you're a key figure. As a designer, you have keys in your mind, and you can turn them to the one or to the other side. So if already you can be aware of this power you have, and you combine it with the conviction that things should change, I'm convinced that change will come. And for many people, this change will have another form or another way of realization. But I think we're at a limit of consuming space with traffic jams, with water problems, with all the things we now meet up to. So their one and only recipe I don't have, but I have the conviction that we will try to solve it.
Is 2040 too late?
For the construction stop?
Yeah.
No, you should not stop constructing, but you can use concrete, but you use it in the right way. So the concrete stop, you can still build in towns, you can still build in places where there are old buildings being replaced or being renovated. There was a study I think in Rotterdam. They said if you take all the rooftops of the town and you put one level on it, we will have enough housing for the next 10 or 15 years. So we don't need any. We just use a space which is available. So you don't have to stop construction, but you have to think about good construction. And maybe you should not do it only in concrete, because there are now other systems like bit more ecological, more circular. But you don't have to stop construction. You have to stop consuming open space.
Right. Yeah. And take maybe back some space that has been.
And take back if you can. It's not easy. Huh? It also has to do with the There is this problem of value. And now recently there was the discussion about if you take the building rights from a building plot, how should you pay for it? How you can decide what's the price of not building? And so there was a discussion. People said, well, you have to pay you have to pay the original price.
The purchase price.
Yes, the purchase price with the
interest.
Interest. And now they decided, no, the government will pay the price of the possible commercial value.
Oh, wow.
So that's It's just not possible. It's not gonna.
That's what they decided now.
Yes, that's not the system.
More debt for the government.
Yeah. So with this model, it will not work.
No,
there is no money for it.
No.
So that will have to change.
Okay. I think we are nearing our limit. I want to respect your time as well. There is so much I haven't even started to ask about.
I also have prepared a bit more, but
I haven't even started to ask about the flat organization structure that you have and the co-ownership and
maybe that's for next time.
But there is indeed we can always do a round 2 in the future because there is so much more to talk about. Maybe to finish off with a slightly lighter question, a fun one to end with. We are hopefully at the end of a pandemic.
Yeah, let's hope.
Hopefully that we in a couple of months we can officially call it over. What's the first place you're going to travel to, or what would you advise people to travel to?
I don't know. I think everyone discovered that there are so many nice places, so very near home. But for me personal, I will travel to Portugal.
Portugal. Any specific?
Well, I'm a bit in love with Portugal because of the country, because of the architecture and the climate.
Okay.
So that will be the destination for me.
Lisbon?
It will be a bit south of Lisbon.
Okay. Any specific architects in Portugal that people should look up?
Well, yes. I think Portugal has the advantage that they developed in 2 or 3 generations a very high level of contemporary architecture based on a very strong tradition. With people like Cinza, Távora, Sousa de Moura, Aires Mateus, very, very nice, very, very good and famous architects who all have this same Portuguese quality that's being humble.
Okay.
And I think maybe to end,
yes,
maybe that's an advice to architects that just be humble. Do not always try to get your own idea. Just in sometimes working like tradition or working with just common sense is very valuable. And so for me, it's not necessary that you can see that every building we build is like a Stramien building. And wow, because it looks like this or like it doesn't have a certain style. We always try to make the building that just fits on the location, on the spot. And if you succeed and people say, "Oh, I even was aware," we succeeded.
Okay, that's a beautiful place to end, I think.
Okay,
stay humble. Bart, I would like to thank you very much for this great first edition, and I really hope we can have another chat in the near future.
Okay, I hope so too. It was very nice to do.
Okay, nice to hear. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening to the Bao Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe to our channel. If you're interested in Bao Living in our Smart Adaptable Module or SAM, go check out our website baoliving.com. If you want to stay up to date, you can best subscribe to our monthly newsletter on our website or follow us on all social media platforms where we're named @Bao Living.